I'm going to turn things over to Randy Zipsey and Eric Thibault to get a little bit more into split dollar for a new age.
Well, thank you, Donald. That was a very kind intro, and thank you everybody for spending some time with us. I see there's almost 50 people here on the call, so I'm very impressed that so many of you want to take some time to listen to Split Dollar 301. Eric, and thank you for being on the call here this morning. It's important to have somebody from the sales side here.
I think we may have lost you a little bit there, Randy.
Well, of course we did.
Yep, there we go.
Again,
gotcha,
you're back.
Perfect. Well, thank you again very much. Donald, let's hit the first slide while I'm still on. There we go. Well, this is from our friends in the compliance area. So I guess we can go right through that. What is collateral assignment split dollar loan regime? I think, Donald, it's probably easier if we build out the slides. I'm not a huge fan of building. Split dollar loan regime, this isn't really a 301 place to start, but I don't think it makes sense to start right in the middle of everything. I think we have to have a base because some of you understand this better than others. Some of you have been in on the 101 and the other calls on split dollar, but not everybody has been. What is collateral assignment split dollar loan regime? It's really a pretty simple concept when you think about it. This is some output here from our case design system, our design hub tool. It just shows you what the output looks like, but it shows a client how collateral assignment split dollar works. And it's simply in its simplest context, it's an executive, a business owner, an employee is getting a loan from the business. The IRS tells you what those minimum loan rates have to be. We'll talk about as we go through here the applicable federal rate. The applicable federal rate is a rate that the IRS says a loan has to be charged at to be considered a loan. If a loan rate is lower than the AFR, it comes with issues in you have to impute up to that minimum loan rate. We can talk a little bit about that as we go, but all we're talking about is a loan from a employer or a business that somebody owns to that individual. And why that is so important today is really for two primary reasons. One, as you see on the bottom left of this slide, C corporations. If you're working with C corporation owners, the C corporation tax rate is 21%. Most of your individual clients are going to be at significantly higher rates than that. Your successful business owners are going to be at rates 35 or higher if they have state income taxes. And the other reason that loan regime split dollar is so important now, and we're going to talk about this as well, is interest rates are at historically low levels. You're able to make these loans at roughly 1%. 1%. So an executive can have use of funds at a 1% interest rate. Eric, there was a time when I think a lot of people in the insurance business thought split dollar was dead, but kind of as the old saying goes, split dollar's dead, long live split the dollar, right? I mean, you're seeing in your world as a regional vice president, split dollar is having a big revival right now. Do you want to just talk a little bit about how often you see it and what kind of context?
Sure. Thank you, Randy. I'm seeing it pretty much in three areas, just as you described here on the slide, where there's an executive or a business owner that's taking a loan or receiving a loan from the corporation. I'm also seeing it in estate planning, which we can talk about a little bit later. And I would say probably the largest activity of late, maybe just a little bit larger than the corporate arrangement, would be for nonprofit. So think hospital systems, think universities, think credit unions. We're seeing a lot of activity in that market. So the market is very wide, Randy. It's not just estate planning. It's not just buy sell. The last 4, 5, 6, 7 years, we've seen a lot of practitioners looking for solutions for the nonprofit world, and Split Dollar is absolutely one of them, and probably one of the best for an executive benefit and executive retention plan. But that is to say also that in my world, I've seen a lot of corporate split dollar, especially in the buy-sell, which I know that you're going to touch on a little bit later as we move through our presentation today.
Thank you. Hey, Donald, can you go to the next slide? And this slide hits on a few of the things that Eric just talked about. Why split dollar? Why split dollar loans? Why now? First of all, it's a valuable benefit. When we talk about insurance planning, non-qualified deferred comp, and using insurance in a business context, you're usually looking at attracting, retaining, and rewarding key executives. Split dollar is certainly one of the best ways to accomplish that. And from an employer's perspective, it's important because the employer, the company, the business gets repaid from the policy values or the death benefit. That's why the business is holding a collateral assignment. It's making a loan, which it's securing with a collateral assignment on that life insurance contract. We've already talked about C corporations, the tax rate at 21%. Business owners are retaining money in the businesses. When tax rates were higher, close to and sometimes over the individual rates, C Corp business owners routinely paid themselves compensation and took all the profits out of the C corporations. Well, today they're not. C Corp owners are retaining profits inside the corporations because of the arbitrage between the corporate tax rates and the individual rates. So there's a lot of liquidity inside of corporations, and there's issues that come with that. There's excess accumulated earnings tax if the business accumulates too much in retained earnings. So life insurance, split dollar, is a very important planning tool now because of the low corporate income tax rates. And as we've already said, the interest rates on an AFR loan are in the 1% range. That's incredibly low by historical levels. If an employer is lending money to an employee at 1%, that employee certainly feels like they've been rewarded substantially. The use on that fund should allow them to have a considerable benefit. So again, right now is a great time for split dollar insurance. If you would change to the next slide, please, Donald. Here is a, yeah.
Go ahead, Randy.
Go ahead, Eric, please.
So this slide gives us just a very small snapshot, year over year, from July of 2019 to July of this year, current, right? So just focus on the green bar and the blue bar. The green bar represents short-term AFR lending rates, which are defined as a loan that is 3 years or less. And then the blue bar is focused on the long-term AFR rates. And that would be a loan of 9 years, anticipated 9 years or greater, up to 30 years, correct, Randy?
There's really no statutory or regulatory cap on the length of it, but most advisors I've worked with over the years, most tax lawyers, start to get queasy when the loans go over 30 years, because 30 years is kind of the market's, 30-year loans are common. Anything over that isn't. So people start to get a little bit concerned about it, Eric. So 30 is, while I wouldn't say it's the top that I generally see.
Right, good. Thank you for that clarification. So what this is really illustrating, hopefully it's jumping off of your computer in front of you right now, is that look at the savings. The difference from 1 year ago, short-term AFR was 2.08 versus 45 today. That is 163 basis points, or 1.63% savings in just 1 year. That's how far the rates have dropped. Looking at long-term, again, last year they were 2.5, and now they're at 1.17. That's 1.33% less. And there's opportunities that we're going to share with you coming up next, especially Randy. I want you to talk about this for me. That shows what you can do by going back to your clients and adding a valuable discussion to your ongoing planning meetings. The one thing I did want to clarify from the last slide is that was obviously a CCorp example. So one thing, and I would like to just defer to the expert here, Randy, be careful about this in a publicly traded company with Sarbanes-Oxley. You want to just give a quick reminder on that, Randy?
Sure, Eric. Sarbanes-Oxley, not exactly new law anymore, although it's certainly still an important thing to keep in mind. Corporations, public corporations, have restrictions on their ability to make loans to certain high-level executives. We could spend quite a bit of time talking about what executives are restricted or not, but just suffice to say, very high-level executives of C corporations that are public corporations, I shouldn't even say C corps, specifically public corps, high-level executives of public corporations are limited in their ability to receive loans. Businesses used to make loans to executives for years and years. It was a common employee benefit that you saw. It was, those loans were oftentimes interest-free or well below market rates of loans. The government, the Securities Commission, tax law, everybody reached the conclusion those loans were an abuse. They were a way to avoid taxation. So they put restrictions in there. And so if you're working with a public company, loan regime split dollar needs to be looked at very carefully. Some tax advisors simply don't want to see loan regime split dollar at all in a public corp, which might be the best solution. Some think maybe there's some levels that you can make it work. But suffice it to say, if you're dealing with a public company, loan regime split dollar is a place you have to be very cautious about because of Sarbanes-Oxley and the restrictions on loans to executives. Anything you want to add there, Eric?
I would just say that if you happen to have a client or a prospective client that is a publicly traded company and you're entertaining this, reach out to Randy or Lena Storm in Advanced Markets or your RVP, and let's talk it through beforehand. So go ahead, Donald. Next slide, please.
No. Let's save it this slide 1 second, Eric, because I like this slide, but I don't think this slide goes far enough. Because I've been giving a presentation on loan regime split dollar now for probably over 10 years. After the 2008 economic incident that we had, or correction, or whatever you want to call it, in 08, interest rates dropped. You know, we felt good about the low interest rate environment that we were operating in then. You know, if you go back to 2008, 2009, I was giving presentations about how loan regime split dollar works. I pulled out my notes. The long-term interest rate, July of 2008, Eric, was 4.6%. I know people put loan regime split dollar arrangements in place in July of 2008. If you went back and redid those loans today, you could save that client 3.5% on that interest rate. On every $1 million of interest, that's $35,000 a year in what you could save from an interest rate. And even if you say, well, 2008 is a long time ago. Well, how about 2014? 6 years ago, 2014, the long-term interest rate was still over 3%. There's a 2% savings just going back and redoing arrangements from 2014. 2% of $1 million. $20,000 on every million. Again, you can buy a lot more additional life insurance with $20,000 a year to spend. July 2017, 2.6%. July of 2018, 3.06%. So as you can see, going back, talking to people that have existing split dollar arrangements in place, you can do a lot of good for clients that have existing split dollar. These interest rates, where they are today, are at historical lows. Maybe a year from now, I'll be on the same call and I'll say, geez, last year the interest rate was 1.1, now it's 0.5, or maybe it'll be Lower than that, I don't know. But if I were a betting person, I think we've hit our bottom or we're really close to it, Eric.
I would agree, Randy. I would agree. And thank you for bringing up that history. It's very important.
All right, Donald, next slide.
So here are the difference that lower rates can make. We're going to talk about a male that's age 60, we're assuming best class, and he has an existing loan at 2.08% short term. Well, look at this. It's 45 basis points now. That's 163 basis points, or 1.63% lower cost, just like we showed you in the last graphical slide. So that is a savings of $16,300 a year. What if the client said, or their advisors advised, they do need some more coverage? Where could they find the money? They could find the money by refinancing their current loan, freeing up $16,300 a year, which on a male 60 could buy an additional $2.2 million of our Lifetime Foundation Elite product, assuming, and again, key is assuming that they do need the coverage and it fits into their overall plan. Let's look at the long term on the right, 2.5, and this is just assuming last year they did the transaction. 1 year later versus 1.17% on the long term. That's 1.3% savings, or $13,300 a year. For the same client, that would be able to purchase an additional $1.8 million of our Lifetime Foundation Elite. And Randy, if I could, I think there's going to be a lot of questions on this, so I'd love to have you spend a moment or two walking through how would we actually affect a refinance. I mean, people that are familiar with premium finance get that, they just go from one bank to the next, but how would you enter into and have a successful outcome for refinancing of your AFR loan?
Well, Eric, let's just use this as think about it this way. Have you ever had a loan on your house?
Yes, absolutely.
Have you ever decided that you can get a lower interest rate, and have you went to a lender and had that lender repay the old loan and put a new loan in place?
Actually, right now, I'm in the process of that. Good example.
It really isn't too much different than that, Eric. You're probably not going to an outside source, right? But there's no reason why you can't refinance a note. It's a note. It can be refinanced. You want to look at the terms of it. But as a general rule, you can repay a loan and create a new loan at a lower interest rate. If you're in a situation whereby you have gain in a split dollar arrangement, meaning that there's more cash value than an amount due back to the employer, that refinancing could be considered to be, a material modification. It could be a termination of the prior split dollar arrangement. It could cause that gain to become taxable. I know plenty of tax advisors who don't think that's the case. I know some that are. So I guess I'm only saying that because if you are in a situation whereby the executive has cash value in excess of what that loan amount is, so there's positive equity in the arrangement, I think you want to talk to your tax advisor to see if they're comfortable with that strategy. But if you're, what I would say, upside down, you're still in a situation where there's less cash than the amount owed back under the split dollar arrangement, then that refinance shouldn't have any tax consequence at all. Does
so
that make
would be
sense?
really this example. It does. This would be the example we're showing actually on the screen then, maybe, is that we're assuming this transaction was entered to a year ago at 2.08.
If it was last year, you probably don't have positive equity, and if you do, it isn't much.
Right, and so you're just, in this scenario, you're still in the premium paying the loan period where getting a new loan each year from your employer and turning that into premium. So that's really helpful, and I think there's a great opportunity for you to do this with your clients. All of the advisors that are on our call this morning is to talk about that. And if you have further questions, you can always reach out to us afterwards.
But
thank you for that
even Eric, if you're back into one of those, but even if you put an arrangement back, into place in 2008, like I said, when the interest rate was 4.6, and let's say that contract is performed well and there's positive cash value on the executive side of the ledger, it still might make sense, even if you believe that positive equity is taxable, if that gain, if you even believe that causes taxation, dropping the interest rate from 4.6 to 1.1 going ahead may still make sense, even if you have some taxation. It's just going to depend on how much gain there is and how old the executive is, how long you think the split dollar agreement is going to run. So I wouldn't rule out looking at refinancing older arrangements that are in a gain situation. You just need to analyze it and work with your tax advisors to see what their belief is on the taxation of that gain. So certainly if you're in a non-gain position, I think it's a no-brainer. But if you are in a gain situation, I wouldn't ignore it as a possibility. It's important to get the right people to look at it.
Thank you, Randy. I really appreciate you clearing that up for all of us. Thank you.
Can we go to the next slide, Donald? Okay, here is, again, just rates from the first half of this year. As you can see, interest rates have dropped at historical levels over the last 6 months. This isn't the point of this slide really, but it just popped into my head right now. And I think I should say it now because I'll forget it later if I don't. Eric, when I'm looking at a split dollar arrangement, one of the questions I always get is, should it be short term? Should it be midterm? Should it be long term? Well, I could make an argument for kind of any of those right now. Certainly with interest rates at 1% roughly, locking in a 30-year 1% interest rate isn't a bad thing to do. But on the other hand, if I lock in a short-term rate that is considerably lower, and the short-term rate isn't on this slide, but it's even lower than the 43 basis points for the midterm here. If I locked in a short-term, less than 3-year loan, 2 years and 364 days, if I lock that in at like 25 basis points, I'm still 75 basis points ahead of where I am on the long-term AFR. So what a lot of advisors I see do, and I don't think it's a bad idea, is they start out with that lower short-term interest rate, Eric, and then when interest rates start to move, they lock in at that point in time. I'm not saying that's the right thing, but I'm saying I see it done and it does make sense. But you have to be careful if interest rates move really quickly, and you have to be sure that you've got somebody staying on top of it. So I think maybe with the long-term rate as low as it is right now, that's a dangerous game to play, but it's not one that's stupid either, I guess, Eric, is the best way to put it.
That makes perfect sense to me. Thank you for clarifying that, because I too have seen or actually received questions about that very thing. Shouldn't I just start right now? And I think the key ingredient here in the soup is, as you just said, staying on top of it. All of the advisory team, that means the insurance advisor, that means probably the tax advisor, the tax attorney, maybe one of the same. Estate planning attorney should be staying on top of this. Thanks for pointing out. That's very key to this.
Next slide, Donald. This just kind of talks about the different kinds of loan regime split dollar arrangements that are out there. Probably the one that we see most of the time, Eric, you can confirm this, but what I see most of the time is a annual loan. Somebody's going to do a full pay, or they're going to do a 10 pay. By the way, I don't like to see these done on a full pay because I don't know what interest rates are going to be a year from now, let alone 30 years from now. But maybe I see somebody do a 5 pay or a 10 pay. There's a definitive length of time where they're going to pay the premium and lock in loans at that point. Sometimes I see them done in lump sum loans. If the client has the liquidity, the business has the liquidity, then maybe lump sum loan makes sense. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I see both annual loans and lump sums, but annual generally tends to be on a short pay. How about you?
I agree. That's all the cases I'm seeing in my territory, my region, are anywhere from 5 to 7 premium. So absolutely, I agree with you.
One of these next slides will show you what a lump sum looks like and why that might make sense. But again, what I usually see is annual on a short pay basis. As Eric has already said, lump sum, I shouldn't say lump sum, split dollar loans can fund buy-sell plans. We'll talk about that. They might fund a business owner's estate plan, or maybe a key person insurance arrangement. If somebody from Global Atlantic wants to do something nice for me, I'd be happy to have a collateral assignment loan regime split dollar plan in place. I don't know about you, Eric, but if anybody from the home office is listening, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Sign me up right after you.
Exactly. And so the loan repayment can be flexible, or you can forgive the loans. The loan can be paid annually, or it can be accrued. But like I said earlier, you have to be sure these are real loans. You have to be sure they are at least at the applicable federal rate. There's also, Eric, a little provision in the tax code that sometimes people forget about. There's a statement every year that the employee, the insured, has to file with their tax return that says that this is in fact a loan and I intend to repay it. If you don't file that with your tax return, there's an argument that that might cause some adverse expected as a loan, or at least at the low current AFR loan rate. So that statement is important to have. Anything you want to add there?
No, that's absolutely. So I think that, again, these are very simple plans, but keep in mind there's going to be some manual work that needs to be done. It's not that overwhelming, but it's just to protect your client. And also, hey, it's another opportunity to talk to your client at least annually. And so most of the advisors, practitioners that are truly focused that I work with on split dollar, they have a process in place where maybe 6 months out they start sending a reminder, and then 1 month out they've provided a report of their interests, and therefore they can absolutely prepare that with their taxes. One thing that a case I just ran across recently, Randy, was actually, it was a family. It was estate planning, where mom and dad wanted to give a lot of the assets to the children now. They don't need much in life. Their home's paid off. They've got moderate cars. They're in good shape, and so I suggested to the advisor to talk about, let's just do split dollar and let's move the assets that way. And the parents came back and said, okay, I like this, except I wouldn't mind some income. I really wouldn't mind some income from this. And I don't think I can do it because 1%, that's really nothing. I mean, I still have to eat and put gas in the car and pay the utility bills. And I pointed out that keep in mind that the AFR rate is the minimum to stay in compliance. The client, could they not charge, Randy, 5% on the loan?
Eric, I've said, I think in the last half an hour, I've used the word minimum about 3 or 4 times already. It's a minimum.
Yep.
Now, is there a maximum? Not written into the code. I think the maximum is probably what's reasonable given the market and the interest rate environment that we live in. Is 5% reasonable? I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily unreasonable. It might be on the high end of what I would consider to be reasonable, but the AFR is a minimum, and the top rates, whatever is reasonable. Take that for what it's worth.
Exactly. So keep in mind that is a planning opportunity. It's something that I hadn't seen before, but a really good planning opportunity when the client, the grantor, mom and dad say, yeah, I'm good with this, but I could use a little more income than what 1% would generate. So thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that, Randy.
Next slide, Donald. Flexibility. I think we've already talked about this slide probably without looking at this slide. When you're dealing with a C-Corp, we've already talked about the significance of that corporation having a 21% tax rate. Those businesses are accumulating earnings. They simply are. Your clients with C-Corps are keeping money in the businesses. They're reducing their compensation and taking less money out and leaving more money in. Just a fact. Here's also a little tax fact that some of the younger people on the call don't know. You have to be my age probably to know that, and most people my age aren't working anymore. So there's a little provision in the tax code area called excess accumulated earnings. If a C-Corp retains too much, and too much is kind of subjective, but there's also a objective number in the tax code, and that's $250,000. Unless you have a subjective reason for keeping more. So a lot of C-Corps are going to have problems with excess accumulated earnings and the excise tax. Life insurance, split dollar planning is a very good way around that. But again, use C-Corp dollars to get out to the executive or the owner or the key person. Lock in today's low interest rates. You can repay the business with policy cash values or death benefit. I mean, split dollar is a very, very powerful tool, especially in the low interest rate. Anything there, Eric, that you want to add, or can we go on?
No, I echo that. We can go on. So let's talk about the lump sum collateral assignment split dollar. So why
Eric, I'm not going to,
Go ahead.
No, feel free. Sorry.
I was just going to say, why wouldn't you, to Randy's point, want to lock in a rate at 1.1% right now? There's no reason not to. So what is the ability? What can we do here? Well, the corporation can make one lump sum loan today into the transaction, even though the premium, if you follow along from left to right, and let me back up just one second. This is a proprietary tool that Randy and Lena Storm have developed called Design Hub. It's part of our Design Hub, which I'm hoping most of you all are very familiar with. This is the output from it. And you'll see just right of center, hopefully you can all see this, the life insurance premium is $500,000 a year. So we could do that. We could do $500,000 a year and lock in the 1.17 today. And as Randy said, we have no idea what the rate's going to be next year or year 5 or year 7. We don't know. But if you'd like to know what that rate's going to be, this is the beauty of AFR loans, is we could have the corporation loan the full $3.4 million, which is the cumulative premium number over that 7 years. So they could loan that now, lock in your rate at 1.17. You'll see the interest is pretty small. We're talking $40,000 in year 1. And what we're doing in this is we are actually accruing the interest here, because you'll see down, if I can direct everybody's eyes to the bottom of the page, where it says repay loan using potential cash values. So you'll see that we're repaying through cash value $4.6 million, but our loan was only $3.4. And the reason being is that in this transaction, both the executive and the business agree to accrue the interest as opposed to imputing it each year and paying that interest annually. So pretty good deal. We've got $3.4 million of a loan. We've locked it in as a lump sum. So we've locked in our AFR rates. We've got our premium covered for the next 7 years. And let's just bring up one obvious point. Oftentimes, what is the big concern of advisors when they're selling a large case is everything's good today, but what if something changes economically next year? They don't have the premium. Well, this kind of solves that problem right there. And then potentially going forward, after we've repaid the loan, we have distribution opportunity here. And you can see at the bottom of the page, approximately, again, this is just an illustration like any other illustration, nothing's guaranteed. We have approximately $531,000 a year in potential distributions from this transaction. So we provided meaningful death benefit to the executive's family, and that is, of course, net of the loan repayment, and then the potential for tax-free income to the executive. What a great retention plan, Randy, wouldn't you agree?
Like I said, Eric, if anybody from the home office is on the line, Eric and I are, we'd be happy to be underwritten.
Absolutely. So Donald, if you go to the next page.
Yeah, so real quick question, guys. So a question came up is, can premium finance be used here? And, you know, in my simple way of putting it, this is a way of premium financing. You're just financing it out of the CCorp dollars. Do you guys agree with that way of saying it?
To answer that question, that would fit into the category of what I refer to as a dual loan. Dual loan can take a number of different looks, but when I use the term dual loan, I'm referring to a situation whereby somebody is getting bank money and turning around and on an AFR loan basis, re-lending that money into some kind of a split dollar arrangement, whether that's private split dollar or whether that's a business split dollar context like this. But to me, that's a dual loan arrangement. So maybe my C corporation has access to bank funding. So maybe I go to my local bank and I say, hey, Pat, you and I have had you've been my banker for 25 years. I need $4 million. I'm doing some business succession planning, some estate planning. I'm doing some work here. I want to put life insurance plan in place. I need $4 million. I'll pledge these assets for that $4 million. And then I'll take that $4 million and I'll enter into this lump sum loan regime split dollar arrangement that is shown here on this page that we have here. So yes, the answer is you can do this with premium financing. It just is kind of takes on a little bit of its own look to it. You probably, I'm not saying you can't, but using that policy to secure the bank loan and then using that same policy under a collateral assignment split dollar arrangement gives me some concern, because while there's nothing that necessarily says you can't use a policy that's already collaterally securing a bank loan to secure a collateral assignment split dollar, I worry that the IRS might not respect that arrangement since that policy is already being used. So I would prefer the business to use another asset and then use the life policy to secure the split dollar arrangement. So I guess that's where I'm at with that. Eric, anything you want to add to that?
No, not at all. And if you have not seen, again, from our design hub, Randy and Lena have a sample dual loan case. So reach out to your RVP if that's of interest to you. But that's a very good
Eric,
question.
Before we slide this to the next slide, I just want to point out a lot of people I see want to take this lump sum split dollar arrangement and put that money immediately into the life insurance policy, which of course is going to create a MEC. MECs aren't bad necessarily. You just have to understand what you have when you have a MEC. And you have to understand the taxation of a MEC. You have to understand that when cash value comes out of a MEC, it's taxable first on a gain basis. So that is a drawback to creating a MEC. The other thing that you have to understand is the MEC rules. If a MEC is used to secure a loan, the gain becomes taxable even when the gain is not received. So in a loan regime split dollar world, with a MEC being used as collateral, being collaterally assigned to secure the split dollar, there's an argument that that causes the gain to become taxable as soon as it grows over on the executive side. Now, will the IRS find it? Am I just being overly cautious? Is that really what the law says? The answer is, I don't know. But I do know that the MEC laws are created in a way that loans on a MEC can cause taxation. And if you're going to do split dollar with a MEC, I greatly encourage you to talk to your tax advisor before you go down that road. Okay, Eric.
Great. Go ahead to the next slide, please, Donald. Okay, so you see now that we have gone out many, many years, the corporation lent the executive $3.4 million. We accrued the interest. repaid the loan from policy cash values, and still was able to take out $530,000 a year. So this is kind of a easy discussion to have with the client. We're going to take out greater in distributions for the executive. So there's an executive reward retention plan right here. All right, we check that box. We provided a meaningful retirement benefit for the executive while still having meaningful death benefit to the executive family, and the corporation got all their money back plus interest. So not a bad situation.
Again, just if you look at the top here, just I know it was tough to tell because you had to have 3 different slides to see it, but we put $500,000 a year into that policy for 7 years, $3.5 million, and I know it's an illustrated basis. The one thing I know about illustrations is that's not what's going to happen. It's either going to be less than that or more than that, but the chances of it being exactly that are slim to none. But on an illustrated basis, we took 530 out for 21 years. So we put 500 in for 7, and the illustrated out was 530 for 21. And as Eric said, plus providing through that arrangement, most of the time, $20 million of death benefit per year, a real meaningful benefit, plus the corporation was paid back. All right, next slide.
Exactly.
Okay, we're getting towards the end of our time, and I definitely want to talk about this, Eric, because this is one of my favorite ways to do a buy-sell arrangement. And for those of you who heard me do buy-sell planning a couple weeks ago, this will be a repeat. I apologize. But this is where buy-sell planning and split dollar planning, well, they intersect. And cross-endorsement buy-sell. Most of you, I hope all of you understand what a cross-purchase buy-sell is. If Eric and I are co-shareholders, we each own half of the business. I own 50% of the shares. Eric owns the other 50% of the shares. Typically, what you're going to do, especially in a C-Corp because of basis planning, we're going to do a cross-purchase arrangement. And traditionally, I'm going to own a policy on Eric. Eric's going to own a policy on me. And traditionally, people have paid for those policies with after-tax dollars. Now, we can do that same cross-purchase now, Eric, with split dollar. I can enter into a split dollar arrangement and buy a policy on you. You can enter into a split dollar arrangement with the business and buy a policy on me, and we can effectuate a traditional cross-purchase buy-sell using loan regime split dollar. But cross-endorsement buy-sell is better. And why is it better? It's better because shareholder A is going to own the policy on his or her own life. Shareholder B is going to own a policy on his or her own life. So I own my policy. Eric owns his policy. We're paying for that under split dollar, like we just have been talking about for the last 40 minutes. We're going to do a loan regime split dollar, and I'm going to own my policy under the loan regime split dollar. Eric is going to own the policy on his life under loan regime split dollar. Maybe what I want from my policy is cash values. Maybe I want long-term care or chronic illness benefits. Maybe Eric wants cheap death benefit because he's got an estate tax or an estate equalization situation. I don't know what somebody's hot button is, what somebody's insurance need is, but now as an agent, you can talk to Eric about his needs. You can talk to me about my permanent long-term needs. And now you sell us a policy, and then we use that policy to temporarily fund the cross-purchase buy-sell as well as fulfilling our permanent needs. And how do we use it for the buy-sell? I simply rent my death benefit annually to Eric. Eric simply takes some or all of his death benefit and rents it to me annually under the cost of term insurance, under the IRS's guidelines, under the 2001-10 guidelines. Cross-endorsement buy-sell, funded through loan regime split dollar. Eric, this turns term sales into permanent sales. I can't tell you over my 25 years of being an advanced sales lawyer how many buy-sell agreements I've worked on, how many buy-sell cases I've been involved with, how often they end up being a term sale. This allows you to look at that arrangement and talk to the client about long-term insurance planning and using the policy also to fund that term need under the buy-sell arrangement. What do you want to add to that?
I think this is fantastic. This is actually one of my favorite types of split dollar planning techniques, because you have that flexibility in that we each own our own policy. Okay. You know, you and I, Randy, were recently talking, and I think it's worth bringing this up about what your father experienced in his own business with his partner. And that was truly the light bulb for me, because people start off as partners, and oftentimes the grass is green, the sun's always shining, and then years go by and personalities change, goals change, and partners can drift apart. And nobody seems to think the adverse effects that would have on a buy-sell. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, I know it's a little personal, but share the story we were talking about just recently.
Certainly. My father for years was 50% owner of a C corporation that ran an implement shop in Iowa. A lot of you know what implement are. It's a tractor place. They sold tractors and combines and equipment and that sort of thing. Did that for years. Very successful. 50-50 ownership. They had a buy-sell in place. There's even a permanent life insurance policy, much to my surprise. Most of the time they're term, but this was actually a permanent policy. So my father owned a policy on his partner, and I use that word loosely because it was a C Corp, and his partner, Marv, owned a policy on my dad, Zip. Marv and Zips was the name of the business. Okay, for those of you who know me, and there's plenty of you out there who do, I'm not the easiest person in the world to get along with, but let me tell you this. I am a freaking ray of sunshine compared to my dad. So after 25 years or so, I think Marv was pretty sick of working with my dad, because who wouldn't be? So my dad had a stroke, became permanently disabled at about 60 years old. Well, what happened was the business ended up getting sold because Marv was a little bit older. He was early 60s. Dad was around 60. So they sold the business, by the way, at a loss from what it would have been worth, because my dad was now not part of it, and he was kind of what drove it. So they sold the business, which tells you why business succession planning is so important to start with. But the business was sold. Now, Marv was owning a life insurance policy on my dad, and my dad was owning a life insurance policy on Marv. My dad was totally disabled from a stroke. Who knew how long he was going to live? So my mom went to Marv and said, I would really like to swap life insurance policies. You can have yours, and I'd like the one on Zip. Want to know what Marv said? Eric already knows the answer to that. Marv said, hell no. Because why would he give that to my mom? Because my dad was in very poor health. Marv thought my dad would probably die, and that was probably a really good investment he was holding, which economically is absolutely true, and I probably would have done the same thing that Marv did. Here's the other shoe. By the way, my dad now is 80 and still alive, and Marv probably wishes he had gotten rid of that policy. But at the time, it seemed like the right thing to do. But if you had had a cross-endorsement buy-sell in place, that wouldn't have even been an issue. That rental would have simply been torn up because it was year to year, and then my dad and my mom would have owned the permanent policy on my dad instead of Marv owning it on my dad. So that's another reason to do a cross endorsement buy-sell. Not the only one, but another one. Anything else, Eric?
No, that's perfect, and that's where I wanted you to highlight the difference between the old-fashioned cross purchase and the downside and the risks versus this cross endorsement. Much more flexibility, much more control, while still meeting the basic goals of a buy-sell, but also offering even greater goals and benefits. As you've mentioned, Randy, if I was focused on, as your partner, death benefit needs for my estate planning, and you were focused on income needs, this type of buy-sell is much more flexible versus the traditional cross-purchase. So thank you for sharing that personal story, Randy.
All right, and this slide again just shows, we've already talked about, but this just shows adding the loan regime to the cross endorsement buy-sell. And we've talked at length about how the loan regime split dollar works. This just shows putting the two ideas together. We can illustrate this for you, by the way, in our Design Hub tool that Eric has referenced. I urge you to give Eric or I a call, or Lena Storm. We'll be happy to do these illustrations for you. Next slide, Donald.
If we could, Randy, we had a quick question I think would be good to address right here is, when you talk about renting out a portion of death benefit, some people may not be as familiar with that and about the, the annual term rate, and how that's set. But what might be some things that producers should look out for or know about for, when they are renting out under a cross endorsement?
Well, that rental, and I use the word rental because using split dollar twice in the same description is painful. But what that rental is simply endorsement split dollar. We've been talking about collateral assignment split dollar all throughout this presentation. Now what I'm doing is I'm layering endorsement split dollar on top of this. So I have my policy. I am going to endorse under endorsement split dollar some or all of that death benefit to Eric. That's simply a rental. What should you look out for? Well, it's an annual rental. The rate has to be at least equal to the IRS's 2001-10 rate, which is a published rate. If a life insurance company has annual renewable term, and that is made available to everybody that applies for insurance and regularly sold in the usual distribution system and sold by the same statutory subsidiary as the permanent product, maybe you can use the carrier's cost of term insurance. But I think you want to talk to your tax lawyer before you do that. So on the safe side, the IRS 2001-10 rate is the safe rental charge. That is the minimum that you're going to charge. That's probably taxable income when it comes back to the owner of the policy, probably. That said, I don't think I know a single soul who's ever put it on their income tax return, but I do think it is taxable income. And again, you should talk to your tax advisor when deciding if you should record that as taxable income or not. But that's all we're talking about is endorsement split dollar. I'm entering into an endorsement split dollar arrangement with Eric. Eric is entering into an endorsement split dollar arrangement with me. It's a year-to-year rental, a year-to-year deal. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I think the best answer to that question is, as you start to come across opportunities like this, I would recommend reaching out to our advanced markets team, either via your regional vice president, or you can contact that team directly. And they can help you kind of talk through the scenario and the situation, and as well as some of the pitfalls and things to watch out for as you go through it. Because I know what I know, but I also know what I don't know. And that's why we've got experts like Randy and Lena and others as part of that team to really help you guys as you get into these situations. You don't have to be an expert in cross endorsement split dollar, in cross endorsement buy sell. We've got folks in our office that can help direct you down the right path with the questions to ask, as well as things to watch out for.
Thank you, Donald.
This is just output from our Design Hub tool. We can, as I said, illustrate the cross endorsement buy sell arrangement. Here's what that looks like. In the interest of time and the fact that these numbers are so small, we'll skip this slide and move on. And wonderfully, that puts us at the end, when it's also the top of the hour. Are there any other questions out there? I really thank you guys for listening. We actually have more people on than when we started, which to me, I want to give you guys a great thanks, because an hour of split dollar is, well, in dog years, it's like 7 hours. So I really appreciate it. Any other questions?
Again, you can post questions via the Q&A or via the chat. Right now I don't see any other questions coming out there. I do want to echo what Randy said, and that we do appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to attend these. We've seen a lot of great attendance. On these webinars that we've been doing over the last month and a half now. And there was a question about sending a link to the prior webinars. Yeah, we can provide that link. I will send it out. You can also go to globalatlanticlife.com, and on the training tab, there, you can find links to the prior training camp webinars that we have done. So those are all out there as well. So, but to Tom, who posted the question, I will send you the link to the prior webinars.
And Donald, we would also be remiss if we didn't tell all of our listeners that we have Split Dollar 401 coming up. And if you thought 301 was fun, just imagine 401. When is the time for that, Eric? Donald?
I love the shameless plug there. So what is the time for that, Donald? That's tomorrow? I believe at 3 p.m. Central. Is that correct?
Yep, 3 p.m. Central is our Split Dollar 401. So when you're ready for more, you know, and the other thing I would tell folks is, with all of our summer training camp series, if you register for the webinar but are not able to attend, we are still sending out a copy of the recording and the slides to all folks who register, not just people who attend. So we're sending it to all attendees as well as anyone who registered and did not attend. So if for some reason you're not able to make it, we will send you the recording. So I'm not seeing any other questions out here. So with that, Eric and Randy, thank you guys very much for your time and your expertise. For all of you on the line, thank you for attending, and we look forward to hosting you again tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and then again next week, 11 o'clock Central on Tuesday, and with Premium Finance 301. So look forward to those, and watch your email for the registration link for next week's webinars. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.